Rosa wiped down the last table in the community center cafeteria, her tired hands moving in the same rhythm they had for the past 12 years. At 67, she knew every corner of this old building better than her own small apartment. The Lincoln Community Center had become her second home, a place where she served hundreds of meals each week to families, seniors, and kids from the neighborhood. The afternoon sun streamed through the dusty windows as Rosa hung up her apron. Most days she would gather her things and head straight to the bus stop. But today felt different. She could hear excited voices coming from the main hall, and her curiosity got the better of her. Peeking around the corner, she saw a small crowd gathered near the bulletin board. Mrs. Chen, who ran the center's programs, stood on a chair trying to hang a colorful poster while several people talked at once. "What's all the fuss about?" Rosa asked Jenny, one of the younger volunteers. "Oh, it's the annual talent show," Jenny replied, rolling her eyes. "Mrs. Chen is panicking because half the people who signed up dropped out. She's begging everyone to participate." Rosa had heard about these talent shows but never paid much attention. She was just the cafeteria lady. These events were for other people. People with actual talents, people who weren't afraid to stand in front of crowds. "We need at least 5 more acts," Mrs. Chen announced to the group. "The show is next Friday and we've already sold tickets. The money goes to the after-school program, so we can't cancel." Rosa watched as Mrs. Chen looked around the room with desperate eyes. The few staff members present suddenly found excuses to leave. Someone mentioned a dentist appointment. Another person remembered urgent errands. Within minutes, only Rosa and a handful of volunteers remained. "Please," Mrs. Chen said, her voice cracking slightly. "Anyone can do something. Sing a song, tell a joke, read a poem. It doesn't have to be perfect." Rosa felt a strange pull in her chest. She thought about the kids who came to the center every day after school. Many of them lived in the same run-down apartments she did, where dreams felt like luxuries no one could afford. The after-school program gave them a safe place to do homework, play games, and just be kids. Before she could stop herself, Rosa's hand slowly went up. I could try something," she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Mrs. Chen's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Rosa, oh wonderful. What's your talent? Do you sing?" Rosa felt her cheeks burn. She had never performed anything in her life. In her small village in El Salvador, where she grew up, there had been no talent shows, no stages, no microphones. Just work and survival and the distant sound of music floating from the church on Sunday mornings. "I don't really know," Rosa admitted. Maybe I could try the piano." The word surprised even her. Where had that come from? She had never touched a piano. Sure, she had always been curious about the old upright piano that sat in the corner of the community room. Sometimes, when she cleaned around it, she would run her fingers along the wooden surface and wonder what it would feel like to press the keys. Mrs. Chen clapped her hands together. "Perfect. The piano is right there and it's in decent shape. Here, let me find you some simple sheet music." She rushed to a cabinet and pulled out a folder stuffed with music sheets. After shuffling through them, she handed Rosa a single page with large, clear notes. "This is chopsticks," Mrs. Chen explained. "It's very basic. Most children can learn it in a few days. Just practice when you can, and don't worry about being perfect. The audience will love that you tried." Rosa stared at the sheet music. The little black dots on the lines looked like a secret code she couldn't understand. What had she gotten herself into? "Is there somewhere I can practice?" Rosa asked. "The music room is usually empty after 4 o'clock, Mrs. Chen said. "Just ask Jerry for the key. He's usually around until 6. Jerry was the maintenance man, a kind older gentleman who had worked at the center even longer than Rosa. He knew everyone's story and kept everyone's secrets. As Rosa walked to the bus stop that evening, the sheet music felt heavy in her purse. She kept thinking about the piano, imagining what it might sound like when she pressed the keys. Would it be loud? Would people hear her practicing and laugh? On the bus ride home, she sat next to Mrs. Rodriguez, her neighbor, who had been coming to the center's senior lunch program for years. "You look different today," Mrs. Rodriguez observed. "Something good happen?" Rosa hesitated, then pulled out the sheet music. "I volunteered to play piano at the talent show." Mrs. Rodriguez's eyebrows shot up. "Piano? I didn't know you played." "I don't," Rosa said with a nervous laugh. "I've never even touched one. So why did you volunteer?" Rosa stared out the bus window at the familiar streets passing by. Why had she volunteered? It seemed crazy now, sitting there with sheet music for a song she couldn't read, planning to play an instrument she'd never touched. I guess I wanted to try something I've always wondered about, Rosa said finally. When I was little, my grandmother used to hum these beautiful songs while she cooked. She said her mother had played piano back in the old days, before they lost everything. I used to dream about what that music might have sounded like. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. Sometimes the things we're meant to do find us when we least expect it. That night, Rosa lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she would ask Jerry for the key to the music room. Tomorrow, she would sit at that piano and see what happened when her fingers touched the keys. She had no idea that in 1 week, she would change not only her own life, but touch the hearts of everyone who heard her play. All she knew was that something deep inside her felt awake for the first time in years. The sheet music sat on her nightstand, waiting for morning. The next morning, Rosa arrived at work 30 minutes early. Her heart pounded as she walked through the empty hallways of the community center. Everything looked different in the quiet morning light, almost mysterious. She found Jerry in his small office, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "World's okayest maintenance guy." He looked up with surprise. "Rosa, you're here early. Everything all right?" "I need a favor," Rosa said, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "Could I borrow the key to the music room? I'm going to be in the talent show." Jerry nearly choked on his coffee. "You, in the talent show? What are you going to do?" "Play piano," Rosa said quickly before she could lose her nerve. Jerry stared at her for a long moment, then broke into a wide grin. "Well, I'll be." Rosa, the piano player. Never would have guessed. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small brass key. "You can use it whenever the room's not booked. Just don't tell Mrs. Chen I gave it to you without filling out the proper forms." Rosa clutched the key like it was made of gold. "Thank you, Jerry, really." The music room was smaller than she remembered. A few folding chairs sat scattered around and music stands leaned against the walls. But in the center of the room, like a sleeping giant, sat the old upright piano. Rosa approached it slowly. The dark wood was scratched and worn, but someone had polished it recently. She lifted the keyboard cover and gasped softly. The keys were yellowed with age, but they looked clean and welcoming. She pulled out the sheet music for chopsticks and set it on the piano's music stand. The black dot still looked like a foreign language, but she had watched enough people at church to know that higher dots meant higher sounds. Taking a deep breath, Rosa pressed one of the white keys near the middle. The sound that came out was pure and clear, nothing like she had expected. It seemed to hang in the air for a moment before fading away. She pressed another key, then another. Each note felt like a small miracle. What Rosa didn't know was that she had been born with something special. Perfect pitch, they call it in music schools. It meant she could hear any note and know exactly what it was, could remember melodies perfectly after hearing them just once. It was a gift that maybe one person in 10,000 possessed, but Rosa had never had a chance to discover this gift. Growing up poor in a small village, then working long hours just to survive, there had been no time for music lessons or piano practice. The gift had stayed hidden, waiting. Now, as her fingers found different keys, something extraordinary began to happen. The notes she heard seemed to connect to melodies buried deep in her memory. Songs her grandmother had hummed, church hymns she had heard on Sundays, even pop songs that played on the radio at work. She spent her entire lunch break in that room just pressing keys and listening. By the time she had to get back to the cafeteria, she had figured out how to play a simple version of Happy Birthday. That afternoon, as Rosa served lunch to the usual crowd, she couldn't stop thinking about the piano. Her hands moved automatically as she ladled soup and sliced bread, but her mind was back in that music room, hearing those beautiful sounds. "You seem different today," said Mr. Patterson, one of the regular seniors who came for lunch. "You're humming." Rosa stopped mid-ladle. She hadn't even realized she was humming. "Sorry about that. Don't be sorry." It was pretty. "What was the song?" Rosa blushed. She had been humming one of her grandmother's old lullabies, something she hadn't thought about in years. After work, Rosa hurried back to the music room. This time she brought a small notebook. If she was going to learn chopsticks, she needed to understand what those dots on the paper meant. She started slowly, matching the dots on the page to the keys on the piano. The first few attempts were clumsy, all wrong notes and awkward pauses. But something magical was happening. Each time she played a wrong note, her ear knew it immediately. Her fingers began to find the right keys almost by instinct. By the end of the week, Rosa could play Chopsticks perfectly. But something strange had happened during those practice sessions. The simple children's song had started to change in her mind. She began hearing other notes that could go with it, harmonies that made the melody richer and more interesting. One evening, Jerry was walking past the music room when he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. It sounded like Chopsticks, but not like any version he had ever heard. This version had depth and soul, with extra notes that made the simple tune sound almost classical. He peeked through the small window in the door and saw Rosa at the piano, completely absorbed in her playing. Her eyes were closed and she was swaying slightly with the music. This wasn't someone struggling to learn a simple song. This was someone who understood music from somewhere deep inside. Jerry watched for several minutes before quietly walking away. He had worked at the community center for 15 years and had seen hundreds of people use that piano. Most of them pecked at the keys awkwardly, trying to remember lessons from childhood. But Rosa played like the piano was part of her. Meanwhile, Rosa had no idea she was creating something special. All she knew was that every evening in the music room felt like coming home. The piano seemed to respond to her touch, and melodies flowed from her fingers like they had been waiting there all along. She started arriving at work even earlier and staying later, just to spend more time practicing. Mrs. Chen noticed but didn't say anything. As long as Rosa's work didn't suffer, she was happy to have someone taking care of the music room. One afternoon, Rosa was cleaning tables when she overheard two volunteers talking about the talent show. "I heard the cafeteria lady is going to play piano," one of them said. "Really? Poor thing. I hope she doesn't embarrass herself too much." Mrs. Chen should have just canceled her act. It's going to be painful to watch. Rosa felt her stomach drop. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was fooling herself. She was just a cafeteria worker who had never played piano before. What made her think she could perform in front of 100 people? That evening, Rosa sat at the piano feeling discouraged. She played Chopsticks the simple way it was written on the sheet music. It sounded basic and childish. Maybe that's all she was capable of. But then, almost without thinking, her fingers began to add the extra notes she had been hearing in her mind. The harmonies flowed naturally, and the rhythm became more complex. Soon the little music room was filled with something that sounded nothing like a beginner's song. Rosa opened her eyes and looked at her hands on the keys. Where had that come from? It was like the music was already inside her, just waiting to be discovered. She had no idea that in 3 days, she would walk onto a stage and show everyone that sometimes the most extraordinary gifts come from the most unexpected places. All she knew was that the piano felt like home, and the music felt like breathing. The talent show was getting closer, and Rosa was about to discover just how powerful hidden dreams could be. Monday morning brought a buzz of excitement to the community center. The talent show was only 4 days away, and everywhere Rosa looked, people were talking about their acts. The teenage dance group practiced their moves in the hallway. Mr. Williams, the retired teacher, rehearsed his magic tricks at lunch. Even quiet Mrs. Park was seen humming scales in the bathroom. But nobody talked about Rosa's piano performance. She wondered if people had forgotten she was even in the show. During her lunch break, Rosa made her way to the music room as usual. But when she got there, she found the door was already open. Inside, a woman she didn't recognize was playing the piano beautifully, her fingers dancing across the keys with obvious skill. Rosa knocked softly on the doorframe. The woman looked up and smiled. "Oh, hello. Are you here to practice too?" "I'm Linda, the new music teacher for the youth program. Mrs. Chen said I could use this room to prepare some songs for the kids." Rosa felt her heart sink. "I'm Rosa. I work in the cafeteria. I was hoping to practice for the talent show." Linda's face brightened. "You're the one playing piano. How wonderful. What piece are you performing?" "Just Chopsticks," Rosa said quietly, suddenly feeling foolish. Here was a real music teacher, and Rosa was planning to play a children's song. "Well, that's a classic," Linda said kindly. "Would you like to play it for me?" "I'd be happy to give you some tips." Rosa's hands started to sweat. Playing alone in the empty room was one thing, but performing for a real musician felt terrifying. But Linda was already moving over to make room on the piano bench. With shaking fingers, Rosa placed her hands on the keys. She started with the basic version of Chopsticks as it was written on the sheet music. Simple, straightforward, exactly what a beginner would play. Linda nodded politely. Very nice. You have good finger position for someone who's just learning. But as Rosa played, something happened. Almost without her permission, her fingers began adding the harmonies she had discovered during her practice sessions. The simple melody grew richer, more complex. Her left hand found a rhythm that perfectly supported the right hand's melody. Linda's polite smile slowly faded, replaced by something closer to amazement. She leaned forward, listening intently as Rosa's version of Chopsticks transformed into something completely unexpected. When Rosa finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Rosa, Linda said slowly, how long have you been playing piano? About a week, Rosa answered honestly. Linda stared at her. A week? You mean you've never had lessons before? Never. I work in the cafeteria. I wanted to try something new. Linda was quiet for another moment, then shook her head in disbelief. What you just played, that wasn't just Chopsticks. That was a complete arrangement with harmonies and counter melodies. Do you read music? Rosa looked down at the sheet music, still showing the simple version she had started with. Not really. I just listen and try to make it sound right. Right, Linda repeated softly. Rosa, do you mind if I ask you something? Can you play this? She pressed a single key. That's F, Rosa said without hesitation. Linda pressed another key. And this? B flat. Linda played a complex chord. Rosa identified every note in it perfectly. Rosa, Linda said, her voice filled with excitement, you have perfect pitch. Do you know how rare that is? And the way you arrange that song? You have natural musical instincts that most people spend years trying to develop. Rosa didn't know what to say. She had always been good at remembering songs and humming along to music, but she thought everyone could do that. I think, Linda continued, you might have a real gift for music. Have you ever considered taking lessons? Rosa almost laughed. I'm 67 years old. I work in a cafeteria. I can't afford music lessons. Age doesn't matter for music, Linda said firmly. And as for lessons, well, let me think about that. That afternoon, word began to spread through the community center. Linda had mentioned Rosa's talent to Mrs. Chen, who told the office staff, who mentioned it to some of the volunteers. By closing time, a small group of people had gathered to hear Rosa practice. Rosa felt nervous with an audience, but she played her arrangement anyway. When she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by enthusiastic applause. Rosa, that was incredible, said Jenny, the young volunteer who had first told her about the talent show. I had no idea you could play like that. Neither did I, Rosa admitted. Over the next 2 days, something unexpected happened. People started stopping by the music room during Rosa's practice sessions. Word spread beyond the community center staff. Some of the seniors who came for lunch asked if they could listen. Parents picking up their kids from the after-school program peeked in to hear the cafeteria lady who plays piano like a professional. Rosa found herself with a growing audience every evening. At first it made her nervous, but gradually she realized that the music felt stronger with people listening. Their attention seemed to fuel something inside her. On Wednesday evening, 2 days before the show, Jerry knocked on the music room door. Behind him stood a man Rosa didn't recognize, carrying what looked like a toolbox. Rosa, this is my friend Pete. He's a piano tuner. I thought maybe our old piano could use some attention before your big performance. Pete listened to Rosa play for a few minutes, then got to work on the piano. He adjusted strings, cleaned keys, and made small repairs. When he was finished, the difference was remarkable. The piano sounded clearer, richer, more responsive to Rosa's touch. This old girl has good bones, Pete told Rosa as he packed up his tools. She just needed a little care. Jerry tells me you've got something special planned for Friday night. I hope so, Rosa said. I'm still not sure I know what I'm doing. Trust me, Pete said with a smile. I've tuned pianos for professional musicians, and what I heard you playing just now, that's the real thing. Thursday morning, Rosa woke up with butterflies in her stomach. One more day until the talent show. As she got ready for work, she looked at herself in the mirror. The same face she had seen every morning for years looked back at her. But something was different. There was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. At work, people kept wishing her luck. Some of the lunch regulars asked if they could buy tickets to the show just to hear her play. Mrs. Rodriguez, her neighbor from the bus, had already bought her ticket and was planning to sit in the front row. "I want to see history in the making," she told Rosa with a wink. That evening, Rosa's final practice session drew the biggest crowd yet. The music room was packed with people sitting on folding chairs, standing along the walls, even peeking in from the hallway. As she played her arrangement of chopsticks, Rosa felt something she had never experienced before. She felt like she was exactly where she belonged. When she finished, the applause was so loud that Mrs. Chen had to ask people to quiet down so the evening programs could continue. As the crowd dispersed, Linda approached Rosa. "I have some exciting news," Linda said. "I talked to my friend who runs a music school across town. After the talent show, she wants to meet you. She said she'd be interested in offering you free lessons if you're willing to help teach some beginning students. Think about it, Rosa. You could really pursue this." Rosa felt dizzy. Free lessons? Teaching others? It seemed impossible. "But I'm just a cafeteria worker," Rosa protested. "No," Linda said gently. "You're a musician who happens to work in a cafeteria. Tomorrow night, everyone is going to see the difference." As Rosa walked to the bus stop that evening, she felt like she was floating. Tomorrow she would walk onto a stage and play piano for hundreds of people. 6 months ago, she couldn't have imagined such a thing. The talent show was less than 24 hours away, and Rosa was about to discover that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places. Friday arrived with a crisp autumn morning that felt full of possibilities. Rosa woke up before her alarm, her heart already racing. Today was the day. After getting dressed, she stood in front of her small mirror and took a deep breath. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. At work, the community center buzzed with preparation for the evening show. Volunteers hung decorations in the main hall while others set up chairs in neat rows. The stage, which was usually just a raised platform where Mrs. Chen made announcements, had been transformed with colorful curtains and bright lights. Rosa tried to focus on her cafeteria duties, but her mind kept wandering to the piano. She had practiced her arrangement of chopsticks dozens of times, but suddenly she worried she might forget everything the moment she sat down at the keyboard. During her lunch break, she slipped into the music room one last time. The piano looked the same as always, but somehow it felt different knowing that in a few hours, she would be playing it in front of hundreds of people. She ran through her piece quietly, her fingers moving automatically across the keys. The music flowed out naturally, just as it had every day for the past week. But today, something extra seemed to happen. New harmonies appeared in her mind, additional flourishes that made the arrangement even more beautiful. "Trust yourself," she said aloud, the way her grandmother used to say before Rosa faced anything difficult. As the afternoon wore on, performers began arriving early to rehearse. The teenage dance group practiced their routine in the hallway, their sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Mr. Williams tested his magic tricks one more time, accidentally dropping his deck of cards and scrambling to pick them up. Rosa watched from the cafeteria doorway, feeling a mixture of excitement and terror. These people all seemed so confident, so sure of what they were going to do. She was just going to sit at a piano and play a children's song. At 5 o'clock, Mrs. Chen gathered all the performers in the small conference room behind the main hall. Rosa found herself squeezed between the dance group and a woman who was planning to recite poetry. "Okay, everyone," Mrs. Chen announced, holding a clipboard with the evening's schedule. "Doors open at 6:30. Show starts at 7. Remember, this is about having fun and supporting our after-school program. Don't worry about being perfect." She read through the performance order. The dance group would open the show, followed by Mr. Williams and his magic act. Rosa was scheduled 5th, right after a young boy who was going to play violin. "Rosa," Mrs. Chen said, "since you're using our piano, you'll stay on stage after Tommy finishes his violin piece. That way we don't have to move the microphone stand." Rosa nodded, though her stomach flipped at the thought of sitting on stage while the violin performance happened right in front of her. As 6:30 approached, Rosa peeked out from backstage and watched the audience file into the main hall. She recognized many faces from the cafeteria, seniors who came for lunch, parents from the after-school program, staff members, and volunteers. Mrs. Rodriguez sat in the front row just as she had promised, wearing her best dress and a huge smile. Linda, the music teacher, had brought several friends from the music school. They sat near the middle, and Rosa felt a flutter of nerves knowing that professional musicians would be listening to her play. Jerry stood near the back, giving Rosa an encouraging thumbs up when he caught her eye. Even Pete, the piano tuner, had come to hear how the old piano sounded in front of an audience. By 7 o'clock, every seat was filled, and people were standing along the walls. Mrs. Chen had to bring in extra chairs from other rooms. Word about the talent show had spread throughout the neighborhood, and it seemed like half the community had come to watch. The show began with Mrs. Chen welcoming everyone and explaining how the money raised would support the after-school program. Then the lights dimmed and the teenage dance group took the stage. Rosa watched from the side, her palms sweating. The dancers moved with energy and precision, earning loud applause from the audience. Mr. Williams followed with his magic act, making handkerchiefs disappear and pulling fake flowers from his sleeves. The crowd laughed and cheered at all the right moments. A young girl sang a song from a popular movie, her sweet voice filling the hall. Then came an older gentleman who told funny stories about his childhood, getting the audience laughing so hard that some people wiped tears from their eyes. Now it was Tommy's turn with his violin. Rosa walked quietly onto the stage and sat at the piano bench while Tommy prepared his piece. The stage lights were brighter than she had expected, making it hard to see individual faces in the audience. But she could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. Tommy played a classical piece beautifully, his young fingers moving skillfully across the violin strings. Rosa tried to listen and appreciate his performance, but her heart was pounding so loudly she could barely hear the music. Her hands felt cold and shaky. When Tommy finished, the audience applauded enthusiastically. He took a bow and walked off stage, leaving Rosa alone at the piano. Mrs. Chen approached the microphone. Our next performer is someone very special to all of us here at the Lincoln Community Center. For 12 years, Rosa has made sure everyone who walks through our doors gets a warm meal and a friendly smile. Tonight, she's going to share another gift with us. Rosa will be playing chopsticks on the piano. Rosa heard some murmurs from the audience. A few people clapped politely, but she could sense that many were expecting a simple, perhaps shaky performance of the basic children's song. After all, she was just the cafeteria lady. She looked down at the piano keys, and for a moment her mind went completely blank. She couldn't remember how to start. Her hands felt frozen. Then from somewhere in the audience, she heard Mrs. Rodriguez's voice. "You've got this, mija." Rosa smiled and placed her hands on the keys. She began with the simple opening of Chopsticks, just as it was written on the original sheet music. The familiar melody rang out clearly in the quiet hall, but then something magical started to happen. Just as it had during her practice sessions, the music began to transform. Her left hand found a gentle rhythm that supported the melody. Her right hand began adding delicate harmonies that turned the simple tune into something much more sophisticated. The audience shifted in their seats, leaning forward. This wasn't what they had expected. This wasn't a beginner struggling through a basic song. This was something extraordinary. Rosa's arrangement continued to evolve. She incorporated classical-style flourishes that showed off the piano's newly tuned sound. She added jazz-influenced harmonies that reflected the music she had absorbed from years of radio listening. There were subtle Latin rhythms that spoke of her heritage and the songs her grandmother had hummed long ago. But most remarkably, Rosa seemed to disappear into the music. Her nervousness vanished as her fingers found notes and combinations she had never played before, as if the piano itself was guiding her. The stage lights, the watching crowd, even her own worries faded away. There was only the music. The arrangement built to a powerful climax with both hands working together to create sounds that filled every corner of the hall. Then it settled into a gentle, almost whisper-soft ending that seemed to float in the air before fading into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The audience sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just heard. This was supposed to be Chopsticks, the simple song every child learns. But what Rosa had played was a masterpiece. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, the entire audience erupted. People jumped to their feet, applauding thunderously. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Others were wiping tears from their eyes. Rosa looked up from the piano keys, surprised to find herself back in the community center hall, surrounded by the faces of people she had served lunch to for years. But now they were looking at her with amazement, respect, and pure joy. She had done it. She had found her voice, and it was more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. The applause seemed to go on forever. Rosa sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the sound of hundreds of people clapping, cheering, and calling out her name. She had never experienced anything like this in her entire life. Mrs. Chen rushed onto the stage with tears streaming down her face. "Rosa, that was incredible. I don't even know what to say." People in the audience were standing up, some wiping their eyes, others still clapping enthusiastically. Rosa could see Mrs. Rodriguez in the front row, beaming with pride and shouting, "That's my neighbor," to anyone who would listen. As Rosa stood up from the piano bench, her legs felt shaky. The bright stage lights made everything feel dreamlike. She took a small bow, still not quite believing what had just happened. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Chen announced into the microphone, "I think we can all agree that Rosa has given us something very special tonight." The applause started up again, even louder than before. Rosa felt her cheeks burning, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. It was from pure joy. She walked off the stage on unsteady legs and immediately found herself surrounded by people. Linda, the music teacher, was one of the first to reach her. "Rosa, that was absolutely stunning. I've heard professional pianists who couldn't play with that kind of emotion and natural musicality. You have to let me introduce you to my friend from the music school." Before Rosa could respond, Jerry appeared at her elbow. "Rosa, I've been working here for 15 years and I've never seen anything like that. You had everyone in the room completely captivated." The show continued with the remaining performers, but Rosa could barely focus on what was happening on stage. People kept approaching her throughout the evening, wanting to shake her hand, ask questions about her music, and tell her how much her performance had moved them. A woman named Patricia, who ran a local senior center, asked if Rosa would consider performing there. "Our residents would absolutely love to hear you play. We could arrange something next month if you're interested." A man who introduced himself as David mentioned that he organized music events at the public library. "We have a beautiful grand piano and I think people would love to hear you play. Would you be open to giving a small concert?" Rosa listened to all these offers with amazement. Just a week ago, she had been invisible, the quiet cafeteria worker who served meals and cleaned tables. Now people were treating her like a real musician. When the talent show ended, the audience didn't seem to want to leave. Groups of people lingered in the main hall, still talking excitedly about what they had witnessed. Many came up to Rosa personally to thank her for such a beautiful performance. Mrs. Rodriguez finally made her way through the crowd to reach Rosa. "Mija," she said, her eyes still bright with tears, "I knew you had something special in you, but this was magic. Your grandmother would be so proud." That comment hit Rosa right in the heart. She had felt her grandmother's presence strongly while she was playing, as if all those old lullabies and songs had finally found their way into the world through her fingers. As people began to leave, Linda approached Rosa with a woman she hadn't met before. "Rosa, this is my friend Carmen, who runs the Martinez Music Academy across town. Carmen, this is the remarkable woman I was telling you about." Carmen shook Rosa's hand warmly. "I have to be honest. When Linda told me about a 67-year-old cafeteria worker who had taught herself piano in a week, I was skeptical. But after hearing you play tonight, Rosa, you have extraordinary natural talent. I would be honored to work with you." She went on to explain her offer. Free piano lessons twice a week, in exchange for Rosa helping with some beginning students. Many of our adult students struggle with confidence. Having someone like you who started later in life and plays with such heart would be incredibly inspiring for them. Rosa felt dizzy with all the possibilities opening up before her. I don't know what to say. This is all so overwhelming. You don't have to decide tonight, Carmen said kindly. Here's my card. Call me when you've had time to think about it. By the time the community center finally closed that night, Rosa was exhausted but exhilarated. Jerry walked her to the bus stop, chatting excitedly about the evening. "You know," he said as they waited for her bus, "I've been hearing beautiful piano music coming from that music room for the past week. I knew someone was practicing, but I never imagined it was you creating those sounds. You're going to be famous, Rosa." Rosa laughed. "I don't want to be famous. I just want to keep playing." On the bus ride home, Rosa stared out the window at the familiar streets, but everything looked different somehow. The same buildings, the same shops, but she felt like she was seeing them through new eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had stayed late to help clean up, sat beside her as always. "So what happens now?" she asked. "I honestly don't know," Rosa replied. People want me to give concerts, take lessons, teach other people. It's all happening so fast. Sometimes life waits a long time to show us what we're really meant to do, Mrs. Rodriguez said wisely. Maybe this is your time. The weekend brought a constant stream of phone calls and visitors. Word about Rosa's performance had spread throughout the neighborhood and beyond. The local newspaper wanted to do a story about her. A radio station asked if she would come on their morning show. On Monday morning, Rosa returned to work at the community center, expecting everything to go back to normal. But as soon as she walked through the doors, she realized that nothing would ever be quite the same. "There's our star," called out one of the volunteers. Mrs. Chen met her with a huge smile and a stack of messages from people wanting to book Rosa for various events. During her lunch break, Rosa made her way to the music room as she had every day for the past week. But when she sat down at the piano, something had changed. The music that came from her fingers was more confident, more complex than anything she had played before. She realized that the performance on Friday night had unlocked something inside her. The fear and self-doubt that had held her back for 67 years were gone. She was ready to see where this musical journey would take her. That afternoon, Rosa called Carmen at the music academy. "I've been thinking about your offer," Rosa said. "When do we start?" 6 months later, Rosa was giving her third public concert at the library's monthly music series. The audience was packed, and people had driven from neighboring towns to hear the woman they were calling the miracle pianist. But Rosa's favorite moments were still the quiet ones in the music room at the community center, where she practiced new pieces and worked with beginning students who came to learn from her. She had discovered that teaching music brought her almost as much joy as playing it. As she looked out at the audience before her latest performance, Rosa remembered the scared cafeteria worker who had raised her hand in a moment of courage just 7 months earlier. That woman had no idea she was about to discover a gift that would change not only her own life, but touch the hearts of everyone who heard her play. Sometimes, Rosa thought as she placed her hands on the piano keys, the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places. And sometimes it's never too late to discover who you were always meant to be. The first notes filled the air, and once again, Rosa's music brought magic into the world.